Hey, hello again, it's me, it's Zachu, and we're back with the day 4, the 4th episode of the team building guides. Day 1 we talked about my generic intro to team building, just the general processes that I go through on a very generic team comp, as well as things to look out for and just general tips that you can use when building your own teams. Day 2 we talked about my absolute favorite type of team core, hyper offense, kind of the positives and drawbacks of hyper offense. And then day 3, we talked about easily the most flexible team comp of balance, which is usually a couple fast attackers, a bulky attacker, and a few support Pokemon, usually 3 support Pokemon to 3 offensive Pokemon. Very flexible, very beginner, maybe not necessarily beginner friendly, but very rewarding ones to learn. Now today we're talking about bulky offense. Bulky offense is the exact opposite of hyper offense. It's usually Pokemon that are really thick, tanky, with good defenses at the cost of speed, right? Before I go on with the team building, I just want to say that over the past maybe month or so that I've been posting videos on YouTube, my channel has seen absolutely amazing growth. I've grown from like 6 subscribers when I started to last I checked I was at like 97. That being said, I am super close to my goal of hitting 100 subs by the end of the year, so I would really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the support I've gotten so far. It truly means a lot to me. I'd really appreciate any support going in the future if you would like to subscribe. I post competitive Pokemon Scarlet and Violet content in the form of guides and sooner or later like battling videos. So if that's something you're into, I would really appreciate any of your support. That being said, we're going to go talk about bulky offensive team building now. So the first big thing that I'll talk about is there's a big misconception. A lot of people, when they think bulky offense, the first thing they think of is hard trick room, right? And while this is true in some cases, like your hard trick room teams classify as bulky offense team, but your bulky offense teams don't classify as hard trick room teams. Your bulky offense teams have a trick room option, but it's not contingent that you get trick room up, whereas your trick room teams, if you don't get trick room up, you tend to have a hard time winning the match. The other thing to talk about is your bulky offense teams tend to run a lot of natural bulk, tend to be Pokemon with a lot of natural bulk, which you get at the cost of your Pokemon having lower speed, right? Things in like the 100 somewhat HP with 85, 90 plus defenses tend to be what you would run on bulky offense teams. They tend to be a little bit lower on speed, usually around the 60 to 70 range, or slower even if they have good offensive stats. Now, similar to balance, it's usually 3 offense mons to 3 supportive Pokemon, which just gives you a really standard offensive core and a really standard support core. It gives you the ability to run Trick Room. However, unlike balance teams, your 3 to 3 offensive mons usually tend to be 3 pretty thick bulk tanky mons, as opposed to the balance where it's usually 1 fast fragile mon and 2 Pokemon that can like set up, or like 2 fast fragile Pokemon and a thick mon, so on and so forth, right? On bulky offense, you tend to run just 3 like thick offensive Pokemon. A lot of the times too, they have like a Trick Room setter and a Trick Room assister. Again, not because Trick Room is very valuable on bulky offense teams, because if you run into a team that is heavily indexed on speed, like outspeeding and OHKOing things, then moving before them is really useful. And then the Trick Room assister is just so you're not trying to like Trick Room raw with a Pokemon that cannot take 2 hits. The other big thing on bulky offense teams is disruption. This is important even if you're running like Trick Room or just generic bulky offense, because without the disruption, you're not going to be able to get Trick Room up, and then on bulky offense teams, without the disruption, you are going to just get outsped and OHKO'd. So this disruption can come in the form of like damage reduction in the forms of like Intimidate, Snarl, Will-O-Wisp, Parting Shot, Screens, or it can even come in the form of like speed disruption in the forms of, say, like speed control moves like bulky or Bulldoze, Icy Wind, Rock Tomb, or Scary Face and Thunder Wave. So disruption is very, very core to bulky offense teams. And so when I'm building a bulky offense team, right, I know right off the bat that I'm going to run into Pokemon that are a lot faster than me. So the first thing I'd like to do is identify potential Trick Room setter, right? That's typically the first thing I like to do is just like, okay, I'm going to run into Pokemon that are faster than me, so how can I set Trick Room? What are some good mons that I can use to set Trick Room right off the bat? The next thing I like to do is find the offensive core, right? Now, the offensive core usually consists of 3 Pokemon. I don't necessarily try to find all 3 of these all at once. Maybe I'll find like the first 2 and find like the patch later on. The next thing I like to do is identify like the flexible disruption. Oh my gosh, disruption. I'm gonna struggle to say that word for the rest of the video, by the way. So the next thing I like to do is find the flexible disruption. Usually this is the damage reduction aspect of the team that can function either in or out of Trick Room, which usually, again, comes in the form of like intimidate Pokemon that can pivot, or like screens or speed control Pokemon. And then the thing I like to find is the Trick Room disruption, the Pokemon that can function outside of Trick Room, but doesn't necessarily function outside of Trick Room as well as the flexible. Usually this is something, okay, this is like one Pokemon that I'm sure we're all thinking of at this point in time, if we have any sort of experience playing against or with Trick Room. And in this sort of style of bulky offense team, the offensive core usually consists of either 2 mid-tier speed Pokemon and 1 slow Pokemon, or you can go obviously like 1 mid and 2 slow, and even on like specifically bulky offense teams that aren't hard Trick Room, you can go 1 fast, 1 mid, and 1 slow, right? Like that is certainly something you can do on bulky offense teams. They're a lot more flexible, and then it strays from like balanced teams because usually these Pokemon just have like your mid and your mid tier and your slow speed Pokemon usually tend to have pretty good offensive stats already and don't have to set up, and then your fast Pokemon is just for damage right off the bat. Part of the reason that I think you have to run, I'll get into that later. So, from a general point in time, if I were to build a hard Trick Room team with this format, right? Not hard Trick Room, sorry. If I were to build a bulky offense team with this specific format, the first Pokemon I would look at is a Trick Room setter, right? And into this current metagame, obviously we have a lot of good staple Trick Room setters. We have Armor Rouge, we have Bronzong, which is pretty good. We have Fire Giraffe. People like this mon because of its Armor Tail ability. It's protected from priority moves, but there's a better way to protect yourself from priority moves that doesn't require Fire Giraffe to be on the field. We'll get into that in a minute. The gist of that is I don't like Fire Giraffe. I don't think it's a good Pokemon. It does one thing, and there are Pokemon that can do it better. There's Gardevoir, which is a very niche Trick Room setter, as well as Gengar. They're not necessarily Trick Room setters that you'd run on bulky offense teams. They're Trick Room answers that you run on hyper offense teams. There's Gothitelle, which has been picking up in usage a little bit here and there. Obviously, Hatterene is a very good one, which we'll get to in a minute. Yeah. Now, I want to talk about this in DDF thing. Like, in DDF, can't normally learn Trick Room by either Egg Move or TM or Level Up, but if you catch an DD in a 5-star Terror raid, it does usually have Trick Room. So that's where that comes from. I know I was confused when I first started looking into that, and I'm just like, hold on. So yeah, I had to look that up and it confused me. I didn't actually know Klefki gets Trick Room, but there are better Trick Room setters than Klefki. Klefki's not a great mon. There's Mimikyu, which is alright. I think Mimikyu is just... it's too fast and doesn't hit hard enough to be a reliable Trick Room setter. I've never liked using it as a Trick Room setter in the past. There's Oranguru, which again, Oranguru just doesn't do anything. It has like Sableye syndrome, where you can just target around it and then it can't do anything else. Now, I think for this specific team right now, a Trick Room Pokemon that has like an actual niche in this metagame is Slowbro. And the reason I'm saying Slowbro is like, you have, firstly you have Oblivious, so you can't be taunted, which means you don't necessarily have to run this beside like Redirection. You can run this like beside like Fake Out or something. And then it has like a really nice disruption ability, right? It has like a really nice ability to be disruptive. You obviously have Trick Room. You also get Yawn on this Pokemon, and then you have pretty good like natural bulk, 95 HP, 110 special or 110 defense, 80 special defense. And so you can run Trick Room, you can run Yawn. Obviously this Pokemon isn't as good as it used to be because it doesn't get Scald and you can't burn physical attackers that way. However, you can still run things like Helping Hand or even Heal Pulse if you wanted to. It also gets Icy Wind for like outside of Trick Room speed control for like your faster Pokemon. It does get Slack Off for like reliable recovery, and then honestly on this Pokemon it has enough bulk to just run Body Press. You run this thing physically defensive, and then you put like leftovers on here. Leftovers oblivious, so you can't be taunted. Or you could even put maybe like covert cloak on here, so that you can't be flinched, right? So you can't be flinched, and you can't be taunted, which means the only way to prevent this Pokemon from setting up Trick Room is to either imprison it or to imprison it. Well, where was I going with this? You either imprison it or you like KO it, and with other disruption methods that we have available, you have a hard time OHKOing this thing. The next thing to talk about, obviously, that I like to identify is like the Trick Room support Pokemon, right? If I need to set up Trick Room, this is the Pokemon I would use to help set up Trick Room in DD. We've used Indeedee a lot. I love Indeedee as a Pokemon. I still think the Safety Goggle set is amazing. It allows you to set Trick Room and still be a thorn in the side of a Mungus. So obviously Psychic Surge, so you can, like the Pokemon on your team can't be faked out. Generic Protect, Follow Me, Helping Hand, and then you could even like, on these sorts of teams, you could even run other moves beside Helping Hand or Protect. I'm still gonna throw like my generic Indeedee set on here that I'm using this generation. I have no reason not to use this Pokemon already. And then as far as bulky offense goes, like the next thing to look at is like now I start focusing on the offensive core. After I have like my potential Trick Room mode solidified, I like to look into my offensive core, right? I don't know, I'm trying to type in offense there. That's not gonna bring up anything. Now, the next, like the big offensive Pokemon that I like to use is Armarouge. I talked about this yesterday with the balance video. That is it's still right here. Armarouge and DD is a really great pair. Bear in mind, I still have no idea what item to put on Armarouge. You could actually technically do White Herb, I guess. That could work. Terra Grass, where is it? The reason I say Terra Grass is because of Armor Cannon. Now, what's great about, Armarouge is that you also still have the ability to run Trick Room. And then Armor Cannon, Expanding Force, and then in this case, I'm actually going to say, I'm actually going to say Run Protect on this set. I don't know why it's saying Run Physically Defensive though, that's a weird. Anyways, so in this set specifically, you can get away with running something like this. Now, Armarouge is great for bulky offense teams because with 85, 180, you have somewhat decent natural bulk. With 75 speed, like I said, you're faster than Trick Room on, so you can reverse Trick Room with your Pokemon and be faster than Trick Room teams, or you can set Trick Room and be faster than the hyper offensive Pokemon. Now, with this team specifically, right, part of team building obviously is patching up your own weaknesses. I have a Psychic type, I have a Psychic type, and I have a Psychic type. Granted, this thing goes Terra Grass most of the time it comes onto the field, but I still have 3 Psychic types. And so one of the biggest issues for Psychic types is Dark types, especially in this format specifically, right? Indeedee isn't too worried about Ghost types, which means you're not ever worried about Shadow Ball because you can just redirect the Shadow Balls into Indeedee. However, against the Dark types, you have a bit of an issue. Now, one of the Pokemon that is really great on bulky offense teams in general is Hariyama. This Pokemon has 144 HP. Not great defenses, but when you have that much HP, it's kind of worth running. So obviously you're gonna run your Flame Orb, Guts, Hariyama with Fake Out, and I think in this set you run Close Combat, Facade, and then Wide Guard. Now Wide Guard is nice because it can also help patch up your like, it patches up any weaknesses to like Goldango. Wide Guard I think is just really good in this format when things like Goldangos Make It Rain, Hydreigon's Heat Wave, and Garchomp's Earthquake are running around the format like crazy, right? It's very good into that. So you have your Hariyama. We're just going to quick change this to -0 because Hariyama is very good Trick Room. There's not really a reason to not run this, and just if you really wanted to, because you have Guts and you will be burned pretty much all the time this thing is on the field, you can run less attack and invest more into bulk if you wanted to. Yes, in this sense you do waste 4 EVs, but it's not that big of a deal if you feel like you want to index on bulk. You don't have to, but you can. So the next Pokemon that I like to look at on like bulky offense teams specifically is like a Flex Disruption Pokemon. And the best Flex Disruption Pokemon, in my opinion, and probably fact, is Grimmsnarl, right? You get Light Clay for your screens, you run Prankster, you have Spirit Break still, you have Dual Screens, and Parting Shot. You can bring this Pokemon in, you can set both screens, you can Parting Shot into an offensive Pokemon, into the offensive Pokemon, or the defensive Pokemon, it will come in and it will not die barring a crit. That's very useful. Grimmsnarl is just, it's an amazing Pokemon this generation. I see Grimmsnarl's usage rising a lot in the future, especially if Indeedee ever starts to die off. Grimmsnarl also gives you more synergy, or not, it gives you more defensive synergy because it's another Pokemon that can switch into Dark and Ghost type moves that threaten your triple psychic core. So you now have two Pokemon that can switch into Dark type moves and a Pokemon that can switch into Ghost type moves. Whereas Grimmsnarl obviously cannot switch into like Goldango's Make It Rain, but you have a Pokemon that can deal with Goldango's Make It Rain anyways. Maybe Body Press on this thing isn't the best option. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you should run Flamethrower with Terrifier. This allows you to actually really stump and actually like kind of check Goldango. That's kind of funny. This might be a troll set, but I think it's funny. Now the last Pokemon on bulky offense teams is like a Trick Room Disruption Pokemon, right? And the best Trick Room Disruption Pokemon that you could ever ask for is my friend Amoonguss. Now, I still think Iron Ball Amoonguss is really great because even against other opposing Trick Room teams, it still makes you slower than the Torkoal and you can put the Torkoal to sleep. I also still think Terra Water Amoonguss is better. On Hariyama, I'm actually going to also say go Terra Normal here. Actually, is there a better Terra type for this Pokemon? I lied, you're going to go Terra Steel Hariyama, and the reason you're going Terra Steel is against fighting types, you're weak to Fairy, you're weak to Psychic, and you're weak to Flying, and Steel resists all of those. So it's a really great defensive type for an offensive Pokemon. If you wanted to, you could swap Facade out for Bullet Punch as well, especially on this team comp that could work, because you don't really have as much, you're not trying to hard set TR, you're just trying to play around like bulky TR. Sorry, I lost, spaced out for a second there. As for the last bulky support Pokemon, you have obviously your Protect, your Spore, your Rage Powder, and your Clear Smoke here. I think Clear Smoke among this gen, or at least at this point in the metagame, is very strong because setup is still really strong. And then with this team course specifically, yes, you only have two really big offensive Pokemon. However, your support Pokemon are still capable of your Slowbro can still do decent damage. I think you're actually just gonna run it this way now. Maybe not max special attack, but a lot of special attack. And index the rest in the defense or something like that, or maybe even the rest in special defense since it's lower. So yeah, well, you only have maybe two offensive Pokemon. You could also always switch Slowbro out for another Trick Room setter or a more offensive Pokemon that has Trick Room. A good example could be let's look. A more offensive Pokemon that has Trick Room. I guess you could technically use Meowscarada here as well. It does kind of fit that one mid, one fast, one slow Pokemon that I was talking about. Actually, yeah, let's do that. You're running Double Grass, but if you're on Protean on this thing, it doesn't matter. If I have Sashies already, then I have Sashies already, but I'm not sure. Protect, what is it? Flower Trick, Knock Off, and Trick Room. That's Trick. This could... That is weird. No. I understand why it's doing that, because it puts Trick Room on a Pokemon and it automatically makes you want to be minus speed nature, but this could actually very well be a team comp that you can use. You have your fast attacker, you have your mid speed attacker, you have your low speed attacker, you have your 3 support Pokemon. So that's kind of that's a bulky offense build that doesn't necessarily rely on Trick Room, because you still have your fast and your semi-fast option, and you also have your disruption. I also think on this version of Grimmsnarl, you could get away with maybe not running Light Screen and running something like Scary Face instead, so you have speed control. Moving on, I want to talk about, since I didn't want to talk about this, I do want to talk about a hard Trick Room team, because you do build these, I personally build these differently than I build my bulky offense teams. And so, as far as my hard Trick Room goes, we'll go to here. Oh, yeah. So, as far as hard TR goes, the first thing I look for is a TR setter, right? The second thing that I think I absolutely have to look for is the Trick Room Enabler, right? If you don't have those two Pokemon on your hard Trick Room team, you will lose 100% of the time because your mons will get outsped and no-code. I also want to point this out. A lot of the issues with Trick Room teams is you have a passive Pokemon that sets Trick Room and a passive Pokemon that helps you set Trick Room. And so when you finally get Trick Room set up, you have 2 Pokemon on the field that don't do any damage, and then your opponent just stalls out your Trick Room by doing literally nothing. They just sit there, and then your Trick Room is stalled out. So this first Trick Room setter has to be offensive. Your Trick Room enabler doesn't necessarily have to be offensive. It's helpful if they are, to have like an offensive enabler and an offensive setter. However, it's not mandatory. I think having an offensive Trick Room setter is very useful, right? The next thing I look for is the second offense. So that when your enabler faints, or your Trick Room setter faints, you have a second offensive Pokemon in the back. Then you want, the fourth thing I like to look for is an offensive enabler, right? So you have your more supportive, bulky, or not bulky, you have your more supportive, disruptive enabler, and then you have your offensive enabler. That way, you can either run, it allows you to run, based on the matchup of course, it allows you to run your offensive setter and your offensive enabler, so that you just have a lot of offensive pressure right off the bat, or you have the offensive setter and the offensive, or the defensive enabler, which allows you to play a little bit more slow, but it gives you like a better opportunity to position in Trick Room a little bit better. Next thing is, the fifth thing I like to look for is like some way to, like a post Trick Room Pokemon that can just be annoying. And then the sixth Pokemon that I like to look for is Disruption. I lied. The sixth thing I like to look for is like a fast attacker, right? A fast offensive attacker. A fast offensive attacker or like a Trick Room Disruption Pokemon, right? Now, the reason being, like, you run a fast offensive Pokemon so that you can get either like very early in the match, just do a lot of burst damage that your opponent isn't expecting, because they will probably lead like defensive Pokemon that don't do a lot into your Trick Room. And so you can lead with your offensive Pokemon and take like a couple KOs or chip a lot of their health away early on. Or you can run this after Trick Room is up and have still like a fast offensive Pokemon in the back to use, right? So as far as hard Trick Room goes, the offensive enabler, the best offensive Trick Room enabler in the format is Hatterene. Maybe Armourouge, but Armourouge isn't necessarily hard Trick Room because it is still quite fast. Hatterene, I like to run Life Orb. I also like to run Magic Bounce on these things so that they can't be taunted. I think Trick Room, Dazzling Gleam. Unfortunately, this thing doesn't get Expanding Force anymore. However, I still think Psychic is a perfectly fine move. And then you can choose, oh, this needs to be Trick Room. I keep doing that. I will continue to do that. Trick Room, Dazzling Gleam, Protect. And you can pick between Mystical Fire. You can choose Nuzzle. Generally, lowering your opponent's speed while Trick Room is up is not great. You can run Shadow Ball. You can run, you can even run Calm Mind on the set. For now, I'm going to say Mystical Fire because it does give you something into the Steel types that threaten your Fairy typing. The Trick Room enabler, once again, the best Trick Room enabler is Indeedee, female specifically. I still think Safety Goggles is the best item for Indeedee. Period. Psychic Surge. Protect, follow me. You know the drill with Indeedee by now. I love this Pokemon. Now the offense number 2 is also another staple of offensive, of hard Trick Room teams. It's Torkoal. You can run this thing with Charcoal or Choice Specs. I'm gonna run Charcoal with Drought, obviously. You Eruption, Terra Fire, and it does a lot of damage. The rest of the moves you can run like Body Press, Yawn, and like Protect. It's a very standard Torkoal moveset. If you are worried about Eruption's damage output after you take a hit, you can run Heat Wave. It has some flexibility on the last few move slots. Now, the offensive enabler, obviously, I think is Hariyama. Hariyama, I still think Hariyama is very good. I don't know why it's burned. Oh, that's why. Flame Orb, Guts again. This pretty much runs the same set as the other one does. Fake Out, Close Combat, Facade, maybe Bullet Punch if you want to. Gives you an option into Fairy types that kind of counter you. And then Wide Guard. And then obviously Terra Steel in this Pokemon. Terra Normal and Indeedee. You can run like different Terra types on Indeedee if you want to. I like Terra Normal and Indeedee. It's just a personal thing. Now, as far as the post Trick Room Pokemon goes, this is a Pokemon that can just be a thorn in your opponent's side. I think Garganacl is really good because it's slow enough to be able to like set itself up under Trick Room. Do I have leftovers yet? I don't. Okay, thank God. So you're on leftovers, Purifying Salt on Garganacl. Usually it's, I literally did a video on this thing. It's Salt. Can't spell it. Salt Cure, Recover, Iron Defense, Body Press with Terra Ghost. that's Terraflying. Terra Ghost. And then the last Pokemon, you either run your Trick Room Disruption Pokemon, in which case I would run Amoonguss, or you run your fast offensive Pokemon outside of Trick Room. And I think in general, like, you have a few options here. You could obviously go with Hydreigon, who has great coverage into the format. You can go with Meowscarada, you can go with Garchomp. I think for the sake of this team, we are going to do Hydreigon with Choice Scarf. Oh my gosh. Choice Scarf, Levitate, I'm having a rough time typing today, give me a second. Draco Meteor, Dark Pulse, I think Heat Wave is good because it allows you to get spread damage with Terrifier. And then like Earth Power, yeah, we could say Earth Power on this set. Earth Power or Flash Cannon on that last set. I think this is a really great, like this is a good Trick Room team. You could even hypothetically lead like Hydreigon, Torkoal, Terrifier, Heat Wave, and do insane damage with that right off the bat. Like dual Heat Wave off the bat could be really strong. Garganacl, you can set Garganacl up under, you can start Garganacl's Iron Defenses up under Trick Room, and it allows that Pokemon to be set up once Trick Room is over and still be a thorn in your opponent's side. So yeah, that's about all I got for bulky offense. Like I said, there's bulky offense and then there's hard Trick Room. There is a difference, but they do play very similarly. They tend to like not necessarily rely on Trick Room, but use Trick Room a lot because of the fast Pokemon in the format. Like I said, this isn't my favorite team style to build because it's it's not necessarily restrictive in a sense, but there's a lot of like, there are certain things that you have to do on these teams that kind of restrict what you're allowed to put on your move slots and the Pokemon you're allowed to use, whereas balance and hyper offense allow you to use a lot more Pokemon. So in that sense, like it's not my favorite team style to use, but it is very strong if you're good at using it. So yeah, that's all I got. I actually think, yeah, so tomorrow I want to talk about, tomorrow I'm going to talk about Wincon building, which again, isn't really any different from the rest of these, but it is something that I want to talk about on its own. So we'll talk about Wincon team building tomorrow. That being said, I've been Zachi. If you made it this far in the video, congratulations. This was a bit of a longer one and I rambled for a long time and talked very fast. I am sorry about that. Had a lot to go over. So yeah, if you like competitive Pokemon content, I once again ask you to please subscribe to the channel. I am super close to 100 subs, which was my end of year goal. But yeah, that's about all I've got for you. So have a good day, evening, or afternoon, or whatever time of day you're watching this, and peace.